going to go ahead. Perfect. We're going to move towards live streaming the next full group session of our event. So if folks are just joining us, some of us have been here for a little bit. Some of us are just getting here. Absolutely be networking, introducing yourselves in the chat, sharing links to your work. I think folks come to this event, obviously, to hear from our incredible suite of speakers that we're so lucky to have, but they also come to meet each other and folks who are doing similar work. If you want, Natalia, I can hand this over to you. I think you have a...
Yeah, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Natalia Rudiak. I am the Director of Special Projects with ReImagine Appalachia, and you may have seen me drop some links in the chat. I will drop my email in the chat if you'd like to get in touch at some point after this. As for some housekeeping notes, we are in this plenary until 2:30. And this plenary is about step-by-step moving from shuttered coal plant to final project. So from listening sessions to breaking ground, we're going to explore key perspectives for communities moving from a concept to a final project. We're going to talk about how to engage community stakeholders. Obviously, you can see that's a big emphasis in ReImagine's vision for repurposing shuttered coal plants. So we're going to talk about engaging with labor. We're going to talk about some key technical concepts and an overview of ReImagine Appalachia's new shuttered coal plant handbook. Like I said, we're here until 2:30, and then we'll have another set of breakout sessions until 3:15 p.m., at which point we will come back into the main room, all right? So stick around. We got a lot going on. Invite your friends. People can pop in and out. That's totally fine. So, all right, moving into this plenary. As we stated at the top of this event, ReImagine Appalachia's goal is to create good jobs that people want in the places they want to live. And we know these shuttered coal plant communities have the workforce of the future. And on that note, one of the most important partners in our community who often get left out of the discussion around new developments or invited in too late is our partners in the labor sector. In organized labor, we at ReImagine, and along with the 200 members in our coalition and our faith leaders and our local elected officials, see strong labor standards as the foundation to creating long-term sustainable wealth in our region. And our union partners are the key to making a bright future possible for Appalachian workers. Local hiring of a skilled workforce creates lifelong careers with dignity and respect. So we want to make sure that any jobs that are created through this process are good jobs. So on this panel, we'll hear from a variety of stakeholders that should be included early and often when discussing new projects. We encourage communities to place labor partners at the top of this list. We are happy to help you find the right contacts to get started. And I bet we have a lot of labor partners in the room who are happy to do that too. If you are, please put your information in the chat. We'd love to get in touch. So to answer some of these questions and more, ReImagine Appalachia has been working for years, literally years, to build the relationships, research, and materials for our shuttered coal plant redevelopment handbook. You're going to hear about it today. We're over the moon to debut this tool as part of this session. So I literally have on my notes here to quote, talk about how awesome the handbook is. You're going to hear from a couple of my teammates, Wendy, Patton, and Rike, Rothenstein, about how awesome the handbook is. We have 6 chapters. It's all online. It's everything from how to start with the guiding principle of highest to best use to federal and technical assistance available for redevelopment. So yes, to discuss all of this today, we're joined by Suzanne Tegen from Colorado State University, who's going to talk about the role of the community during the redevelopment process. We're going to hear from Jesse Roush from the Southeastern Port Authority in Washington County, Ohio, to talk more in detail about nitty-gritty steps for redevelopment. And like I said, Wendy and Rike from my team will walk us through the handbook. There will not be time for Q&A today. It can happen in the following sessions. Actually, each of our speakers here today will be in a breakout session. So if you're interested in financing, you can come to breakout session 2 with Rike. If you're interested in remediation, you can join Wendy at option 3. And if you're interested in site development considerations with Jesse, please check out option 4. So that's where we'll do our Q&A. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our amazing panelists. I'm so excited. This is going to be so interesting. We're all here because we find this work fascinating, right? So I'm going to hand it over to Suzanne. Thank you for being here today.
Great, thank you. And I think I should be able to share my slides, right?
You should be able to.
Okay.
Let's all cross our fingers.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, oh, maybe, is it
there
working?
We go. We see
okay.
it.
Okay. All right, and I'll try to get it in the right mode here. So I'm Suzanne Tegen, and I am the Deputy Director at the Center for the New Energy Economy at Colorado State University. And this is a little bit about our center, and I won't go over all the programs, but we work with legislators and governors and state energy offices on clean energy policy. And we also work with energy communities in transition, mostly in the West, but also all over the country. We work with utilities, and we have 2 free policy tools that are online. One called the Advanced Energy Legislation Tracker, and the other one called the State Policy Opportunity Tracker. So if you're interested in clean energy policy, those are free tools that track every piece of legislation at the state level. And now we will jump into this. Not only do I work at the Center for the New Energy Economy, but I also have a joint appointment with the National Renewable Energy Lab, which is one of the Department of Energy's national laboratories. And there, one of my roles is as the International Energy Agency's, I lead a task on social science and renewable energy acceptance. And so this slide is showing results from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, from some of my colleagues there. And what I wanted to show with this is not about coal plant redevelopment, but it's about new infrastructure in a community. Something, change is hard, right? So coming into a place that everybody knows and loves, where they live, but something new coming in. So the primary cause developers find, the primary cause of cancellation for a newly introduced wind plant or a newly introduced solar plant is community opposition. For wind. For solar, that is number 3. But this just kind of shows that community really needs to be engaged, and we must involve the community in the decisions that are happening in their area. The survey that was done by my colleagues asked developers, how should we engage the community where this project is proposed? And they said, well, the public should provide input, right? In large part here, up in the almost 80% of them said the public should provide input, but they shouldn't make decisions, and they shouldn't even make recommendations. So we have a long way to go in the mindset of development and what comes into a town that's new. We really have to work with our developer community, and local governments to remember that people want to be heard, right? It's their community. And what we find as a social science community, when we've studied these decisions over time about new infrastructure in a community, is that people, even if the decision doesn't end up going the way that they voted, if they were listened to throughout the process, they feel better about it, and they might not, protest that new thing. So the photo here on the upper right is from Craig, Colorado, where I've been working since 2018. And Craig and in Moffat County and the nearby county both have coal plants and coal mines that are shutting down. And I'll tell you, the quote comes from that. So first, what I want to do is just go over the lingo that you might be very familiar with already, but I think it's worth repeating because it's really difficult when we talk about all these things. People use community benefits agreements or plans or funds or whatever it is. So there are kind of 4 groups that the National Renewable Energy Lab has defined for us, and I put a link there on the slide in case people are interested. But the first one is formal agreements, like the community benefits agreement. And this one is where developers and representatives from government or communities sign agreements about providing benefits from a project and also describing details there and timelines. And these will vary depending on who signs the agreement and what kind of infrastructure is going in. But again, they're called tribal benefits agreements or community benefits agreements. You've heard of those, and they're not required, right? So if you're receiving federal funding, sometimes these are required, but usually, typically in the U.S., they're not required. There's some places where, for like a wind project or a solar project or a different kind of project, they might be required by your local ordinance or maybe by your state, but typically they are unfortunately not required. And then there are payments to local governments. So this is where developers provide payments or donations or some other financial benefit to a local government, a tribal government, something outside of a formal signed agreement. And these are often one-time payments. And then there are community benefits funds from developers, and developers can establish funds to distribute to community members or organizations over time. This can be through grants or other funding mechanisms. And the one that Melody Villard is quoted about here, she's a county commissioner in Moffat County, which is where Craig is from that picture. This is about a settlement between the utility and the town that was negotiated over almost a year. Tri-State is the utility, and they are giving the town $22 million for a community economic development trust fund over 5 years. It's between 2026 and 2029. And this one had to be approved by our Public Utilities Commission, so they don't always, but this one did. And then the town will also receive more because of the lost tax revenue. So they have an even greater agreement for that. And I just want to read Melody's quote. She says, "It would be hard to overstate how truly groundbreaking this agreement is. The commitments made by Tri-State, the utility, ensure that the communities are not left behind in the transition, and will now have reliable long-term resources to drive our own transition and determine the trajectory of Moffat County's economy after coal." And that they're excited to partner. But this was a great way for them to, they were all really worried about, of course, like we always are, about the loss of tax revenue, right? And then their direct contributions to local organizations or local causes, programs, fire departments, baseball fields. You've seen a lot of these, I'm sure. Utilities have donated greenhouses, I've heard, or like old equipment from the utility that they don't need anymore to like a local community college training program or something. And then this is an example of that you've probably heard of. I know some folks that were going to be on this webinar, so I'm not sure if they're here now, but John Grosshans from the EPA and Jeremy Richardson, who's at RMI now, has talked about this example. But this is an example in Lansing, Michigan. This beautiful building on the upper right used to be a coal plant and is now an insurance company. So why would you think about, doing this? Why don't you want to just tear down the coal plant? Well, we're all here, right, so that we can revitalize infrastructure like this to improve the existing infrastructure, but also maybe people love this building. I mean, this one is it looks really unique, right? So this is like probably a landmark for that town. You can retain that. You can keep jobs in the community. It's not necessarily the same people working at the insurance company that were working at the coal plant, but you have jobs that you're providing in this building for your community, and maybe in the future add new jobs, which will lead to income tax revenue for your community. Also, it keeps long-term spending in that location. There might be gas stations, or maybe it's in a downtown area. This one is on a riverfront, and they revitalized the riverfront, and it's beautiful now. So There's just long-term spending opportunities in that location. And then restart, if it's been shuttered for a long time, restarting that tax revenue to the localities. And some of what it takes a lot, right? We've all been hearing about this today, and you guys know about this in your day jobs. It's a messy process. And some of what it takes, though, are to really incentivize the developer, because they're not going to clean up this mess that they're not just going to take this on. So they need to be incentivized. And then the developer needs to share benefits with the community that just gave them the incentives, right? Of course, trust and time. So some of the ways that for this project that they did provide incentives to the developer, there are different amounts, but it's like there was 12.5 million in property tax abatements, 11 million in a historic tax credit, 10 million in brownfield tax credits, 9 million from the state in an economic growth authority tax credit, and some more for the riverfront development from the state, and 600,000 from the EPA to do cleanup. So many different sources of funding, but that there was enough of that. There was almost $60 million. So the new asset owner, said, okay, it will be worth it for me. This just is a reminder that inclusion is intentional. And when we have projects like this that we're going to introduce to a community, people say, bring more people to the table. Well, one thing that I have found in working in coal towns and rural towns is that people have great ideas, and they probably have a town plan already, but often they don't want to talk about their ideas if the person or the people who usually have the megaphone in that town are at that meeting. So it's really important to have small group discussions, not all together. Because you know how that is in any situation. It can be a big city too, but there are some people who just always seem to have that megaphone, right? And they're speaking in the interest of the community, but maybe not everybody in the community feels that way. So it's important to talk to them when they're not in front of everybody else. And so this is what I would say, change is hard, like we all know. And Bhima Sastry was just saying, one thing he would recommend was for everybody to come together, the local government, the community, and the asset owner. So when you do that, and when you bring everybody together, which is really important to get those three groups, like I said, communities already have ideas for what comes next. So instead of jumping in and asking for new ideas, make sure you look at the existing plans first, because some of them are really invested in those. If you can hold regular facilitated community meetings, that's really great. It depends on how much time you have. Maybe the coal plant is still closing. Maybe it's been shuttered for a while. So if you could, even if it's just quarterly or something, hold these regular meetings, offer them at different times, provide childcare. There are a lot of free meeting spaces in schools, or wherever your 4-H group meets, or your church group meets, or your school board meets. A lot of times towns and cities have free meeting spaces. University extensions can be a huge help. Tribal and community colleges and local businesses sometimes will think about their revitalization of the whole area, and they'll provide food or something like that, money, funding for the small meetings. And this is not a lot, this is in the hundreds of dollars. It's important to remember about the water rights and rail access that coal plants and coal infrastructure has. So in the local settlement that I was talking about with Craig, the water rights are being discussed, and so that's a really important piece of ownership that can be transferred. Also for remediation and reclamation and construction, all of those jobs could be local if you have the local workforce for it. It would be really important and meaningful for the people who worked in that coal plant to also be able to shape it into something new, if that's what they want to do. But use that local workforce if you can. And then the timing for revitalizing the infrastructure is important. Maybe you can have an agreement with the new asset owner that, the construction for the new asset can't be, in July and August because we have a beach here and that's what brings in all the money for this town. Certainly that's happened in some, I know, in some oceanfront locations or ocean locations. So, you can work with them to put that in your agreement. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're meeting with people. So this is my last slide, and this is just to remember to talk about the long term for your community. They really deserve to have accountability and responsibility from the people who are making these agreements, to evaluate different scenarios. When you look at A or B, how will they affect the neighborhood, right? So if you have an eco business incubator or maybe housing or something that includes restaurants, what are you building and how will that impact the people who live there? If you're making something really nice and new, is it going to increase the property values in that neighborhood so much that the people who live there now won't be able to live there? It's just something really important to think about. And then to set up a plan to check on the benefits over time. Like, did they happen, every year or 2 years, look back? And what if they didn't happen? What are the teeth in your agreement? Make sure that people are held accountable for this. There are a lot of different examples of this. You're going to hear about some of the tools today, so I didn't list them all, but there's some really, really good examples out there and tools you can use. And then remember the fun part. This is about going from how do we do these community meetings and community agreements to, the shovel. So when you have your agreement, celebrate that agreement with the community and your local government, your asset owner. It's not just a photo op, right? For the people at the top. Make sure that you give appreciation to the people who were there at all of the meetings, and the people who couldn't come, right? Who gave their ideas online or something like that. And show the vision.
So sorry.
No, that's okay.
I'm going to intervene.
Thanks.
So we make sure we get all of our speakers in. That was really fantastic, and I hope you can share that presentation with us so we can share it with our community here. And I think I said your name wrong, Suzanne Tegen. Is that correct?
Suzanne Tegen. Yeah.
Yes, correct. Awesome. All right. Next we have Jesse Roush. Again, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. I have a difficult name, so I'm always sensitive to that. So please, let's hear what we got cooking in Southeast Ohio.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and attempt to share a screen because this is definitely, I think it helps to have a visual.
Your audio seems to be a little fuzzy. I'm not sure if it's the echo in the room or something. Is everybody else hearing some?
It's a little faint.
Yeah, it's a little faint. Yeah.
Needs to be closer to the mic.
Yeah, can you move a little closer?
Hold on a second.
Your screen share, however, is beautiful.
Yeah. Is that any better audio-wise?
I
think it sounds better.
It's better.
Yeah,
a little better,
a touch better. Let's go with it.
Okay. How about this time?
Oh,
perfect.
Yeah.
Too many choices on where to project.
That's the right one.
You got it.
Good. And you can see the slide that says Southeastern Ohio Port Authority?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we are the lead economic development agency here in Washington County, Ohio, southeast corner of the state. And I always have to preface that we don't own boats because if you're from the northeast portion of the country, a lot of times there's an expectation that we have some focus on maritime development. I know the folks in Pittsburgh, a lot of times it's airports and buses, but in Ohio, there's 61 port authorities and everyone has a slightly different business model. And over the last 4 or 5 years, ours has really become brownfield redevelopment focused on our 2 former coal-fired power plants. So we see both of those sites as mechanisms and vessels for, not only achieving our mission, but moving the needle forward for our community. And we've got 2 primary projects in the work right now. This is the Muskingum River Industrial Park, and the yellow line just signifies the boundary of what was formerly more than a 600-acre campus for the AEP Muskingum River plant. And that plant was decommissioned and finally shuttered in 2015. And I can say, as someone who grew up in this community and knew many of the people who worked there, there was no thinking about what was next. There wasn't a lot of communication. And I know that was kind of covered in the first plenary session about sort of the communication from the site owners themselves and the communities and thinking about a roadmap. In general, this community was kind of left with, now what with these sites? This is the most prominent industrial footprint we have in our community. It's actually a portion of it that lays in the neighboring county to the north of us. The labor shed here extended to about 9 different counties in 2 states when it was fully functioning at 400 employees. So to see that site go away and those jobs go away, it's obviously a major impact to our community. And so as the lead economic development organization, we immediately started asking ourselves, okay, now what? If not us, then who? So we spent a few years really recruiting the who, and we found ourselves in a position in 2020 to be the who. We were the ones in the driver's seat to consider the acquisition. And I think for us, the most difficult conversation in these redevelopment plans and strategies we put together was just our tolerance for risk. And that conversation took 3 or 4 years with our board to consider, what are we willing to take on? What are we willing to consider to do on behalf of our community? So that was an internal organizational conversation that was influenced by our community. So we've talked, a good bit about community engagement. For us, that's connections to our local chamber of commerce, the school board, the township trustees, folks that used to work there that have worked at new facilities. Particularly in our county commissioner base right now, 2 of our 3 county commissioners were from this community. So having their buy-in at an early stage and having them understand the risks that we were thinking about taking on in the community and getting that buy-in from all of those folks was critical for us to go ahead and put our foot in the ring, so to speak, and complete the acquisition. That led to then a greater conversation about, okay, we have a second decommissioned coal-fired power plant that's been decommissioned and shuttered. This facility is actually American Municipal Power. I think Chastity earlier, if you were in that breakout session, alluded to the AMP site. This site sits on the river about 25 miles east of the site you just looked at, and it's actually connected by rail to this site. So when we go back to the Muskingum River Industrial Park, when I showed that picture at an early stage, folks see that river and they say, is that navigable? Can we get a barge there? And we can't. That's a non-navigable waterway. It's really a recreational waterway. And so that transformed the way that we started to look at this AMP site. And we realized we have a tremendous opportunity to take our riverfront, which is actually the most riverfront of any county in all of Ohio, and we have the opportunity to marry that to 50 miles of rail that serves our heavy industrial rail use base. In a grand vision, we can take raw materials off the river here at this former site as a functioning multimodal port facility. All 3 modes of transportation come up nicely. We bring our raw material off here, we rail it out to the Muskingum River Industrial Park, and we produce it into a value-added good. We bring it back out, we put it back on the river. And so over the last 4 years, we've, through a lot of due diligence, a lot of difficult conversations, a lot of community engagement, we've been able to position ourselves to hopefully close on this particular property before the end of the year. And we will successfully now be the owners of our 2 former coal-fired power plants. And so we really felt like putting ourselves in the driver's seat to determine some of that, what is the highest and best use question marks. Who are the people that we want operating in our community? We want to prioritize local workforce and local labor. So as the local economic development entity in control of these 2 key real estate assets, we have a lot more opportunity to drive those conversations to where we think they'll be beneficial. And, when you're thinking about buying these properties, there's a whole host of due diligence that needs to be considered. Foreshadowing to breakout session 4, we're going to dig into the nuts and bolts on that. It's not quite as easy as it sounds sometimes, but the reality is that now as a community, we have some say over what happens here next. So that's my pitch at a high level.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. We are chugging along, no pun intended. I'm going to pass it over to Wendy Patton and Dr. Rike Rothenstein, who are going to talk about our Shuttered Coal Plant Handbook.
Thank you so much. And I am going to try to share my screen.
You got it. We see it.
You see it. Very good.
Yeah.
And it's in the right form. Okay. I'm Wendy Patton. I'm with ReImagine Appalachia. My colleague Rike Rothenstein and I have compiled a handbook full of case studies, definitions, lists of experts, and technical information to help communities working on plans to redevelop their shuttered coal plant. Full disclaimer, the information in the handbook is based on the in-depth knowledge of our colleagues here at ReImagine Appalachia, our partners in ReImagine Appalachia, some of whom you've heard from today. And the entire section on redeveloping property is based pretty much on what Jesse Roush and his partner in redevelopment, Bryce Custer, who will be in a breakout session a little bit later today, shared with me about the nuts and bolts of redeveloping a shuttered coal handbook. Shuttered coal site. The handbook is intended for use in pulling the community into this unwieldy and sometimes difficult planning process. The practice of economic development can be very secretive because the stakes are very high. Jobs are badly wanted. If a new employer or a new member of the tax base comes into town and it works, people are reelected. It's a success. It's great for the community. If it craters, if it doesn't go through, that's something else. The election results may not be so good. The stakes are very high. So the process tends to be secretive. This is not an ideal situation. In the redevelopment of something as big as a coal plant and a process that takes as long as a coal plant redevelopment takes, you really do need to have community involvement. There's many ways, many barriers to redevelopment, and you don't want community strife and community conflict, which are here at the list of our, major barriers to redevelopment being, starting things from the get-go. So our handbook looks at the many ways in which the community can be brought into the discussion and the many resources and sources of technical assistance out there to help. We have 6 chapters in this online handbook. The first chapter looks at the highest and best use. The second chapter on getting started. The third chapter is on the development process. The fourth chapter looks at turning liabilities like an unused shuttered coal plant, which is valuable industrial land, into an asset. The fifth chapter about understanding your community, and the sixth chapter about the extensive financial and technical assistance that is out there. You've heard about all of these issues today. This handbook gives you some more resources on them. We rely heavily on the intergovernmental working group. Throughout the handbook, you will have links to this very valuable website. Every picture will have a, pardon my dog, I hadn't expected this. Every picture will take you to a link that is a tool, and we have many videos and webinars. So when you see a picture, it's attached to something live that can be helpful in your process. Okay, so we have these six chapters, and the first is based on the guiding principle, highest and best use for the community as well as for the developer, which we've heard a lot about today. This Venn diagram illustrates what the conversation will be about. The private sector interest, you will have, this land is valuable. The infrastructure on the land, the electrical connections are of increasing value to reshoring manufacturing plants. So there are many things that the private sector players will be interested in: access to transportation, the electrical grid, the land, and so forth. Then there are things the community is interested in that we've heard about today: a voice in the future, the tax base, environmental protections, and so forth. This is the sweet spot, sustainable development that gives that long-term opportunity to the community. And that's what the discussion with the community is going to be about. So we give definitions. Highest and best use is a technical term used in the appraisal process. And we give you links to, well, what's the standard definition? And then we expand to say, okay, the community definition of highest and best use may vary from the one that it gives the highest return on investment. And that's where your conversation takes place. What are the factors that you consider when the community starts discussing it? We give you lots of resources to inform the thought process of you and your community. We start with the blueprint for Appalachia that we have on our website for our community conversations, but there are many other blueprints and resources throughout. With that, we move on to chapter 2, which is on community visioning or community planning. What do we want for a long-term and sustainable future? In terms of getting started, we go straight to the interagency working group that Bima discussed this morning. They let's see here if I can click on this. Like all of our small graphics here, you click on the button and it takes you to the working site. And here you see that the intergovernmental agency has a getting started guide with definitions, techniques, and other resources that will be useful to you in your planning process. We take you through resources other organizations have developed. The Delta Institute has done lots of planning. They have written their own book on coal plant redevelopment guidebook. The EPA has fact sheets on redevelopment. We offer where do you start in your coal community? We start with a model of a community-based redevelopment process in Washington State. And then we move into definitions. Why right now is having a community benefit planning process in place of great importance? One reason is that the Department of Energy maximizes financial benefits in some of their programs for communities that focus on a community plan that has a plan for engaging communities in labor, investing in workers with good jobs, advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility through recruitment and training, and working in a Justice 40 community, which is a community which may be distressed or may have lost a lot of jobs due to energy transition. We have definitions. What are community benefits? What is an agreement? What is community planning? And with these, of course, we have resources under each fold-out button. We give you steps to community planning. Where do you get started? How do you identify groups to include? How do you create a coalition? And so forth. And we go into techniques, visioning, charrette, devising guiding principles, and lots of case studies.
Wendy, I'm going to ask you to go quickly so we can get Rika's comments in.
Okay, I'm going. The next 3 chapters are on the development process, which has substantive information. I'll just show you the topics that we cover: ownership, physical characteristics, and remediation, infrastructure, and regulation and oversight. It has lots of definitions for the people who are not experts. What is an appraisal? What is an easement? And for people who are experts, where do I look for ownership of this plant? And then I think I'll just stop sharing now. We have a section on returning assets to liabilities like coal ash to the market, and one on identifying key statistics about your community so that you know better what kind of jobs you need for your community and who's going to be attracted to it. Over to Rike.
Lots of good stuff. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. Okay, I will keep it short and sweet. I will talk about the last chapter. That's the one I was responsible for in the handbook for redeveloping shuttered coal plants. Chapter 6, which looks at the financial and technical assistance we are having. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Great. Okay. And I hope sometimes it shows it with comments. I hope not today. Okay, again, I cover or I am responsible for the 6th chapter. Wendy did the other 4, and this chapter covers financing and technical assistance. It looks at tools and resources that help you find federal funding opportunities and technical assistance programs. I do focus on federal resources, but also cover some state resources. And again, the footprint of ReImagine Appalachia is in Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Kentucky. So those are the regional resources I focus on. And there are as well links and resources listed that are of philanthropic organizations, like the Just Transition Fund, for example. So what was the goal when I worked on this chapter, when I wrote the chapter? The goal is to help you find federal and, as I said, state funding opportunities when you want to redevelop a shuttered coal plant site, but also find federal funding opportunities for your coal community in general. And then besides those grants and tax credits, loan programs, what are out there, there are also a lot of resources for technical assistance. So when you just get started.
Rika,
And
I just
Rika,
want to
you're-
interrupt. Yes, Jinx. I think you need to start slideshow. We only see the first page.
Okay, let me do that before. This is what you see as well.
It was the right slideshow. You just, yep.
What do you see?
It's being very
we aren't
slow.
seeing it.
Yeah, it's being very slow. It just says you started screen sharing, but it's just a blank black screen. Why don't you try it one more time?
Okay, let me go back to my...
We might have broken the system because it's so full of information.
That's fine. I also might not go to slideshow and just keep it like that.
Oh, there it is.
You see
Yes,
it? Okay,
that's
I
perfect.
just, yeah,
Okay,
just
so
to be
then
safe.
go up to,
I
yeah,
keep
go
it
up
like that.
right
Press
to the
button that
slideshow.
says slideshow at the top right. The
I
button.
did, and then it
Yes.
froze, so I
And
will
then it
not do
froze.
that.
So we will
Yes.
not do that.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Beautiful.
I will stay like that.
Okay.
You can all read it, I hope. Okay, so,
Yes.
but yeah, those points I just reiterated are typed here. It's not that much, so I can continue. So here again, we have the top of this is how the website looks like, and you have the 7 sections of the website. So if I would be on the website where you find the handbook, you can click on overview, funding trackers, redevelopment programs, brownfields, community programs, ARC, that's the Appalachian Regional Commission, or technical assistance. And then you go to those sections directly. So those are links. So here we have them a little bit eye-friendly font. Yeah, what do you have? So in the overview, I describe what's a tax credit, what is a grant program, what is a loan, and also general information about the interagency working group. You heard about that a lot. There's a definition for energy communities. They get special funding. Or are considered specifically. You can get higher tax credits, for instance. So you find all that information there. Then the second section, you find funding trackers, which is essentially a search engine where you can look for funding opportunities for your community. And then point 3 and 4, this is where you find, again, those grants, tax credits, and loan programs discussed that help you with site redevelopment. So this is everything brownfield related. So that's the remediation part of the coal plant site, and then the redevelopment programs you find in section 3. And when you are interested in programs of economic development for your coal community in general, then you can go to section 5 and to section 6. So there, section 5 are like general federal programs for economic development of a community. And then in section 6, you find what the Appalachian Regional Commission has to offer, which programs and resources they have to offer. And then finally, number 7 looks at technical assistance resources. You find that in the handbook. And I'm closing with, yeah, so what was my mission when I wrote that chapter? What did I want to achieve? Is I wanted to introduce a host of relevant financing and technical assistance resources, again, for site development and for economic development of the coal community as a whole. And what my goal was is to provide you a short but detailed enough overview of a certain program so you as a user can decide, is that a program I want to look into further or not? And if you decide yes, just from that little excerpt that I find in the handbook, this is something I want to learn more about, then I have like a bunch of links attached with that leads you to further resources, webinars, etc., where you can learn more about those programs. Yeah, and that's I'm concluding with that. Thank you, everybody.
Wow, look at us. We finished at 2:30. Y'all are amazing. Round of applause. This was fantastic. We really appreciate everybody's thoughts here. If you want to drop your emails in the chat, if you're open to discussion, that would be awesome. We're going to move into breakouts now. Let's see, some of us will be auto moved, like Star Trek, I always say, we'll just be beamed up. But here are your options. Come join me. I'll be in option 5. But our speakers are going to be, I can actually mention it. Rike is going to be in option 2. Wendy's going to be in option 3, and Jesse's going to be in option 4.
Great. I'm opening the rooms. So now is the time in the party where you let us know what room you want to be in. Liam, I'm going to make you host so that you can stop the live stream. I do not see a way to do that.
Sure.
And so we, our technology masters are moving folks over. Again, if you are joining us via phone, you can press *6 to unmute and go ahead and tell us verbally where you would like to go. If you have a question about the breakout rooms, you're also welcome to come off mute at this time and ask that question. Yeah, I need to be made co-host whenever someone gets a minute, and then I can help start moving people. Sorry, it's a little technology dance that we're doing.
Dana, this is Jesse.
Yeah.
So I have a question. So option 2 is for the community focused funding and TA. Option 4 is for site development consideration. I was going to be discussing our TIC-TAC, so that would be the funding.
Yeah, the site development, honestly, we should have just called it the Jesse Roush Q&A time, because that is going to be for folks who have questions for Jesse and his work to go in there and ask. So I think
different Jesse. Okay.
That's fantastic. I mean, so I would recommend that opportunity to get a moment with Jesse to anybody, because he's doing brilliant work. But if for the TikTok stuff, I would say probably 2. Yeah.
Okay, well, because I'll be hosting, so I forgot the other Jesse was hosting, so I got us mixed up.
Okay, sorry about that.